feel free to move your cushion or chair or mat to wherever you wish in the hall. This is the first day of the May 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. There are many new people here who have never been to retreat, but also for all of us who have been to many retreats or to a few, it's important to face this whole issue of authority, which is usually the first thing we talk about. Our relationship to authority, our creating authority, wanting to follow authority or fighting authority. Which also brings us to our relationship with each other. How are you and I related in this retreat to start out with, and outside of retreat? And of course we have to talk about listening. How does one listen to a talk like this, and to the wind and the trees? Is there a quality of listening that is different from our usual way of listening? And can that come into being in a retreat like this? And also be there in our daily life, at least every once in a while? A listening without opposition, without resistance, without wanting. Starting with the whole question of authority. It seems to be given in a situation like this, one person sitting in front of many persons, a microphone to the side. Does such a person instantly, inevitably, exert authority on the minds of the listener? And by authority we mean that as a listener, an audience, one is inclined to take what is said for the truth, for something that one has to accept or maybe reject, to fight or to follow. This is how we've been brought up, to listen to someone who sits in such a context. One may have heard something about the person who is giving the talk, holding meetings, read about her. An image is formed in the mind which takes its place with similar images of someone one has heard about, has read about, or has read a book by. And the mind, which is part of the body with its accompaniment to all of our thoughts, elevates that person into some kind of a position of authority, meaning one has to accept, follow, swallow, or fight what the person is saying. because she or he knows something or has something that I don't have. I've heard it, I've read it, someone has said it. I assume it out of this context. Is that what's going on in the mind? It may not be open on a platter to be seen freely. It may be implied, implicit, hidden, concealed. And yet it's there in all of us. This associating somebody in a certain context, with a certain background, with authority. And immediately the inner demand to accept or reject, to follow or to fight, to elevate or to put down. First time I sat on this chair, I used to sit on the mat, I had hurt the knee. One person who had come from abroad, never been here before, sitting in the first row, was closer at the time. She said, I just hated sitting there looking up to you. Something seemed so wrong in that. You sitting higher than me. That's why now I do explain why I sit on this chair. The knee has healed fairly well, but I like the chair. It's comfortable. And I invite other people to use chairs. And now there are quite a few people who also sit in this altitude. But see, we don't do these things intentionally. The brain does it. What it has learned in the past is stored as passive/active knowledge. Passive up to a moment, and then when something reminds me, language is so imprecise, inaccurate. When something is associated in the brain, very little is understood about this yet, this associated with that which took place in the past. All the power of the past memory with its emotions and feelings comes into play as what we could call active knowledge. And oneself very little aware of these switchings and triggerings in the mind and body toward a person who reminds me of the school principal, the party leader, or the priest or priestess, mother superior. Or just the school teacher, or just the mother. Just the older sister who was taller and dispensed authoritative commands. Do this, don't do that. This is bad. So what we're trying to do here together in an atmosphere, we said it last night, of friendliness, of gentleness, of sharing and discussing in meetings, is to bring to light what so dimly, darkly moves all of us. The memories, the associations, and all the physical accompaniment called emotions, tensions, stress, accompaniment to the thoughts and associations. So quickly, flash-like triggered in the mind. Can one at all become aware of that? Is that humanly possible? Somebody may say right out of hand, no, it's not possible, it's impossible. You can never become aware of it. It's too fast. But here we don't start with any assumption or conclusion. At least we try not to, we may have them. Then let's call each other's attention to it. If you hear that I'm talking from assumption and haven't looked at it or questioned it, then question it with me. I'm in this whole thing. We're doing this work together. So we don't say it's impossible to become aware of such switch quick associations. No, somebody says, I'm saying, it's nothing possible, it's possible. There's a state of mind or no mind where things like that, you reminding me of this, and the emotion just about to burst out, to implode or explode, can come into awareness. It's a wondrous thing that this is possible for human beings. Because it is possible, we're continuing to wondering in all depth about ourselves and see whether the combined and solitary misery and sorrow of human beings that has lasted throughout the centuries can be lit up with understanding. And in that understanding, maybe just for that moment of understanding, we're not asking for more, we're asking for understanding. And that has to happen with what happens in one human being, me, right now, next moment. As you say something that hurts my pride, as we say, can I wonder about this, not just take for granted that human beings have pride, and of course the pride gets hurt, and there's justified pride and unjustified pride, and all of these assumptions we have, all these opinions passed on to us through our parents, teachers, sisters, brothers, friends, the media now. Media are one of the prime movers in this day and age of opinions and imagery, as a tremendous know-how about how to manipulate images of us to make us buyers, consumers, voters, approvers of policy, or deniers of problems by presenting entertainment that distracts from looking at the seriousness of our situation, of our human situation. Not that we every moment have to look at the seriousness of our situation. I'm not putting down entertainment. It has its proper place. So, who am I to talk? This is what people sometimes say. Well, why do you sit up there? Why don't other people sit up there? Well, other people sit up there too. Maybe not in this hall, maybe someplace else. Maybe also in this hall at other times. I'm here, I want to share something, talk about something, but not for you or me to be talked into. Also by saying something, very often one can talk oneself into things, not just the listener. Oneself is one's own best listener. I remember this, but participating in some very traditional forms in a spiritual training center. As I explained these forms and these rituals and ceremonies to my family and friends who were quite incredulous of what I was doing. Trying to explain it and convince, I was every time convincing myself a little bit more too. So this is not, I'm watching it. It's not what I want to do, to convince people or condition them. Talk you or me into something. I want to open things up together so we can look, is this so? Why is this so? And wonder about it. And in that wondering, begin to shed light of looking and listening without fixed point of view. Not starting with a conclusion. And this is not the action of authority is it? The moment we make authority out of somebody, or make something into authority, a book, a creed, a person, a tradition, we stop looking. That's clear, isn't it? Does something rebel against this? Can one look and listen to that too? Because we have found safety, security, some measure of tranquility in our beliefs, belief about how this world is governed, how it was created maybe how someday it will break apart, come to naught. We may have beliefs in this, and just having a belief, something to hold on to, gives us some sense of security, which is immediately rattled when somebody questions that belief. And the rattling may either bring a state of anxiety, depression, or holding on stronger, or fighting for it. Getting angry at the person who says something or wonders. All of this tremendous network of reactions and responses to when our beliefs and opinions are questioned can be observed by a human being in oneself, if one is so inclined to question. If one doesn't want to question, well, then one doesn't. And no one here will hit anyone, hopefully, over the head. You have to believe this. So this is not our way. There's nothing to believe. There's only to question and look and find out. And if you find out what's going on in yourself with regard to establishing authority or wishing for authority or fighting authority, when you understand that as it happens, you don't have to believe in it. You see it. To the extent that clarity comes into being, clarity of seeing and looking and listening, understanding, our beliefs are seen to be useless, of no function. Which means one is willing to face anxiety, insecurity, uncomfortableness, which comes with this work, as well as joyful moments of discovering and hearing clearly the call of a bird, seeing sparklingly fresh the movement of foliage in the wind. The joy of this immediacy and directness and freshness comes with this work, as well as discovering things about oneself that one has never believed were there, because usually believe in a certain image or certain images about ourselves, and we hold on to those. And if it turns out that we're not like the way we have been brought up to believe we are, we feel shaken, depressed, upset, ashamed or guilty, as though we were responsible to maintain this image, this idealistic image about ourselves. And we don't want to be responsible for what we see actually goes on in ourselves, the greed, the anger, maybe jealousy, violence, goes on in human beings, like you and me. So is one ready to face that without immediately identifying with it, not saying, oh my God, how I am, I'm terrible, or I'm marvelous. We're looking at a human being here in full operation. And what is observed in oneself, the processes, thought-provoking feelings and emotions that we call anger, thought maintaining the anger through thinking some more about what she or he did. The nerve of him, of her, to do that. Such thoughts prolong and maintain the anger. By watching such a process carefully, without fear, because one doesn't identify with it, one watches human anger, not just Toni's anger, ABC's anger. There's anger. And if one watches it carefully, it's not anger anymore, it's just this thought elicits this feeling. Blood may be rushing to the head, maybe the heart pounding faster, the muscles tensing. Maybe the fist, if one is so inclined to punch, the fist may start to form. Or a feeling of clamming up, wanting to withdraw, and a vivid imagination going on, or talking to oneself. Mostly about the other person. But we're wondering, can one focus, look, listen inwardly what happens when he or she, quote, makes me angry? Not just special out, not just focus on that person and how impossible he or she is, or he always does that to me. But what is going on here? And then maybe an opening up, a widening out to also wonder what goes on in him or her to say such a thing, to do such a thing. Then we're coming into a more peaceful region of relationship, wondering about all of that moves us human beings, not here just me and you since you and I were born, but as long as maybe human beings have existed. Anger and the maintenance of anger and the expression of anger and the reaction and retaliation for angry deeds. Can we see that in looking at this, we are looking at what moves all human beings? And in finding out about anger, we're finding out about monumental human problems. And if there's a way to understand this in oneself, we have understood everyone. So many people ask, what's social action about sitting for oneself and looking into oneself in a beautiful spot? One person just mentioned to me, my family or my people think I'm just self-indulging myself here. Well, if the people who say that came and began to look quietly, people are quiet around one, no television or conversation going, one would find out is not self-indulgence. It's revealing the self and questioning it and the uncertainty that goes with that, because this is what we think we are. The idea of myself, the imagery. And by finding out about that, I find out about everyone else. And then maybe the action that comes in the wake of understanding deeply has something to do with everyone else, not just with myself. On a very inconspicuous level. It's not flashy. Visible. I do such and such and such social political action. We can be visible with our political and social action. This is much less visible to the outside. It takes place inwardly. And yet the expression or action that comes from it affects whoever we're near. And maybe whoever we're far away from. We know so little about how we affect each other over long distances. The idea is we have to be very close, talking with each other within earshot to affect each other, seeing each other's facial expressions. And yet who knows, whatever work one does in looking into oneself, shedding light on what moves all human beings, who knows how we affect each other with that. And whether we affect each other with it or not, do we have to do it because we have no choice left? Because all the other things we've done, trying to improve myself, trying to read up, trying to make resolutions, promises, change of relationships, change of this or that, has never brought lasting contentment. One wants to find out the root source of discontent. I've gotten very much into this stuff already, haven't I? Started out by talking about authority, but it's a living example of what I'm talking about. Not to accept what I say as now this being the truth, something to be remembered, but something to be questioned and tested or discovered in oneself. Or maybe what one discovers in oneself is not like what was said, then please let's discuss it. I may not put something clearly, I may not put it properly. I'm fallible, open to challenge. And if we work in this way, then it's not this old-fashioned and yet still ever so strongly going on pattern of student-teacher, which I abhor. But friends working together on the same problems, looking at the same things, revealing ourselves to each other, or revealing ourselves in our relationship with someone else. The way I just reacted to you, what it reveals, I didn't think that was there. Irritation, upset. If you hadn't been there to say something or look in a certain way, this reaction wouldn't have come up. In the solitude of a hermitage in the desert or in the mountains, wouldn't have happened. So I may reach some states of tranquility. The moment I return back into the city or community where people may challenge me, or say things that I don't like to hear, where am I? Peaceful, tranquil, unaffected? Maybe, maybe not. That's why relationship is such a vital learning spring. Not I wish we were related better to each other, but how do we relate to each other? Find out, and with that comes a betterment. Because we're no longer just insisting you be like that and me like this, but how are we to each other, with each other? And this is not said with authority, it's an open question for all of us to catch fire on, to wonder about. Usually conventionally our idea of getting help with a problem is that somebody gives us support, takes our side, agrees with us. Sort of putting Humpty Dumpty together again. I was broken up with, hurt. My friend takes my side, says, yeah, how horrible it was of him or her to do that to you. But here we're asking deeper, why do I get hurt in the first place? There's no principle of not supporting something or saying something friendly to someone who is in pain or sadness, or put an arm around the person. There's nothing wrong with that. But one can also wonder, together or alone, why do I get hurt time and time again? Upset, afraid, guilty. Let me listen deeply to this whole movement, which starts with a remembrance, with a thought, with an impression, which one may not have caught. It may have escaped the attention. And now is the upheaval, physical upheaval. But one can listen in at any time. There's so much to watch. Because the reality, the concreteness of this present physical upheaval has a way of lending reality to what caused it. As though, because it feels so real to have an upset stomach or an aching solar plexus, because it feels so real, one is convinced there must be something real to be afraid of or to be angry at. You have to discover that, catch that. Don't know what initially triggered it, or maybe one does, but now one is all upset and thought keeps on going. You're looking for something to be afraid of, or maintaining the anger with more stories. Or feeling this is righteous anger because of the way I feel. Or thinking I shouldn't feel like this. I should make a vow not to become angry. I ought to change. I shouldn't be like that. All of these conflicting movements of thoughts going through the mind and creating conflicting physical responses. I ought to change, and then the thought, I'm the way I am. I should remain that way. The people should accept me the way I am. At the moment before, I may have thought I should change. And then I discover the feeling, darn it, if I should change, I want to stay the way I am. So it's all open to look, to discover, not to follow what somebody says or writes in a spiritual book, in a psychology book, social science, therapy. To find out what moves human beings like me. Actually, as it happens. And then as one has an insight or sees something, to freely let go of it, so the mind is open again to look and listen freshly. If we do understand something and have an insight, it's often such a profound experience, then we cling to that and are enclosed again and now in the insight chamber, where we wallow in the fact that we've had an insight, or create a new image about ourselves as an insightful person, and talk from memory again rather than look freshly at this situation of being attached to the image of having had insight. What is it that keeps the mind fresh, dying to what was, as it were? in looking, listening freshly, with fresh energy. Such a mind is, as we said last night, is nobody, is not image identified. Even though it can see the tendency to attach to images, and then all the consequences of that, elation and depression, hurtness, or all the good feelings of flattery go with image attachment. To see that, to see it and die to it as that process is noticed. Can it happen quickly? Don't say yes it can or no it can't. We were mentioning in the beginning that we also talk about this listening quality. In a talk like this, in a week like this, or in a day, in a moment. How do we listen? What is the quality of listening / looking / feeling? The senses all operating together. In the mode of mind that is normally engaged in among us human beings, we listen from my point of view of myself or whoever I'm identified with, my country, my group, my religion, my family, my friends. We listen from that vantage point. I'm not saying this as a truth to be accepted, written down, remembered, but questioned and discovered in oneself whether this is so. To find out how whatever we see and hear, the almost instantaneous bringing oneself in relationship with that. I like that. I don't. I would like to have more of that. I hate that. How could anything like this enough? Our way of complaining about it, which is also our own point of view, conditioned into this mind. We listen from our own conditioning, our own background, racial, cultural, educational, social. The experiences we've had, the wants that have been established in us, either genetically or through environment. From that point of view, we listen. From our fears for ourselves or our group. It's amazing to discover how quickly, if this mind is engaged, this mode of mind, how quickly the relationship is there to what does it mean to me, what does it bring me, or how could it hurt me? And some of that is very functional in terms of survival. The brain has to function and has been conditioned to function very quickly, to see danger that threatens physical survival, to duck, hide, run, be paralyzed as though one was dead, like little caterpillars. If you're threatened, they just become dead caterpillars. Not really, but so lifeless looking that the bird may pass it up. So some of these responses have a function for survival. But we will notice that we bring ourselves in relationship to things wanting or fearing, which have nothing to do with survival of this physical organism anymore, but survival of me, mine. my ideas and fantasies about myself and my country, my group. It's everywhere observable right now, having just gone through a war which is not finished. Tremendous surge of identification in this country, manipulated very skillfully. Not ultra-consciously, we're not attributing ultra-consciousness to anyone. Manipulated by politicians, by the media, by the manufacturers of flags and yellow ribbons must not be in a recession right now. They must all be doing very well. Identification with this cause and seeing everything from how does it help our country, our troops, our people. Not all of them, not inner city blacks. We're not so concerned about that. Keeping our troops alive. Never mind the others, they're bad. This imagery has been created and is not new. It already falls into an existing slot of good and bad, the righteous warrior fighting evil to extirpate it once and for all from the earth. So the events, as one watched the news, were seen so much. How does it help us? And not even very clearly thinking through, what is this help? What are we trying to do? What are the consequences? In human suffering and in oneself and in, what is the word for it? Being so, I remember it from Germany, you were so fixated on a certain way of thinking. That word escaped me, was in use all the time. Only one right point of view, one country to worry about, one glory to strive for. But it's not just on this worldwide global scale, it's also in oneself. As one sees something, does one bring oneself into relationship? How does it benefit me or threaten me? We're not saying it's right or wrong. These are mechanisms that move us and move us against each other or blind us, let's put it that way. Make us blind. And yet if light is shed on such a mechanism, one can wonder, well, what does this thing look like or this person look like without me wondering how good he is for me or how bad? Can I look without bringing myself into it? Is there another mode of listening, looking, perceiving, which is free from the self-centered vantage point? And maybe as one asks this question and observes, the first answer is no, there is not. Everything seems to be imbued with self-centeredness. Sometimes people have taken it very seriously and worked on it. Have come back the next day or after a week, said, I haven't found anything that's not self-centered. That's some insight, isn't it? Into the way that mode of the mind works, where self-center is the center of perception. And yet, in perceiving that, is there condemnation of it? Is there acceptance of it, or is it just seen for what it is? Then that perception is not self-centered. It's clear that almost all perceptions that take place in this body-mind are self-centered, issue from a self-center, which is thought, remembrance, background, education, wants, fears. . see that and not react depressed about it. Of course, if depression comes up, can one feel that out too? What are its ingredients? Why do I feel depressed in finding out that everything perceived is self-centered? Is it because I've nurtured an image over many years that I'm an unself-centered person, altruistic? And now I find out I'm not, and I'm depressed because I'm not the image. We're not the image. What are we? From moment to moment. Are we wondering and also listening to this plane? Open, without an immediate answer. So we're asking, is there a listening? Can there be a listening, maybe for instants at a time, in which there is no self-center? And as it comes up, it's noticed. If it's really noticed, it doesn't need to take over the whole scene. It can be seen, and then the listening is there again. Not I should listen unself-centeredly. That's very self-centered thinking. Just listening. Looking at the green, the grass, the tree line, the clouds, people around. Sitting, the body breathing. The body is breathing every moment. One doesn't have to make an exercise out of it. It's happening all on its own. Can one listen to the breathing? The breathing of the trees and of the shades, and this body, the wherever it all is, the whole body is breathing. Listen to it without wanting to change it or control it. Become somebody in the process, a diligent meditator or something. Just to listen to what's going on in a childlike, innocent way. And to listen to what is said, not how does she compare with my other teacher, or with what she said at another time, last year or so, but just listen. Those thoughts may come up, but to listen to them too and not be caught up in them, because that ends the listening freely. It's only when I don't want anything of anybody or anything for myself, then this listening is there in abundance. And it does not exclude what goes on in this organism, the feelings, sensations, the breathing, the heartbeat, maybe a tingling of energy, maybe a pain in the hip or back or head or chest, pressure someplace, tension. To listen to it all as room for everything in this universe to be and to listen to. Because that's what this universe is, everything. in an open state of quiet listening. We will end here for today.